Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Flowers, and I am the committee chair for Northwest Akuho for the Professional Development Committee and work on putting together the First Friday webinar series. So welcome to our First Friday webinar for August, and we have an excellent presenter for you today. Eric Scott is joining us from Central Washington University to talk about the Sophomore Year Experience. So we're really excited for him today, and we appreciate your patience with some of the technical issues this morning. So just make sure you can see his great PowerPoint, and he has a wonderful video for us. But at the end, Eric will be able to answer some questions for all of you. So if you do get questions, please type them into the group chat. But we will take those at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric. Good morning.
All right. Good morning, Katie. Good morning, Northwest. I'm excited to be here with you. So this presentation is a very similar presentation to the one that I gave at Akuho I down in Orlando in June. And since that time, we started prepping for fall quarter and figuring out what the next academic year looks like. So you're going to see some of the information from last year and hopefully hear a little bit about where we're going with this program for the next year. So let me get into the meat of the PowerPoint here. So this is what we promised you. Their first year is over, now what? So I know a lot of schools in the region. We have a lot of first-year residential students, and then in their second year, they start making more decisions about what they're going to do in terms of their student life. So that's no different than what we have here at Central. So last year, they convened a task force, and we created this position. So I want to share with you about what that process was like. I'm going to identify some of the issues that face our sophomore year students and why this program's a necessity here. We're going to describe what we did over the last year. We're going to tell you a little bit about what we have seen nationally. And then we're going to talk about ways for this upcoming year that we are looking at how we assess and define the sophomore year experience. Really, we're in going into the second year, and it's very much another self-study year. We like to be able to tell about what our sophomore year students are doing. So in a nutshell, it's why sophomores, why CWU, why nationally, and then how do we know it's working? How do we know what we know? So getting into it, there's been a national push for the sophomore year experience. And over the last 5 years, we have really seen an explosion of sophomore year experience programs. And so nationally, why is there that focus on the sophomore year experience? If you are interested in starting a program, if you have not done anything, or even if you are doing a program, I really strongly suggest you look up Molly Schaller and you look at the work that she's done. I've got two great articles for you to read. One's a little bit older. I believe it's an '07 article, and the other one's 2012. But if you do a Google Scholar search, I'm sure your library has it at your university. But she really talks about the sophomore development and how do you switch their exploration, because in that first year, it's a random exploration. They are being introduced to the university, being introduced to the concept of higher education, and how do you move them from that random exploration of ideas, thoughts, and experiences to a focused exploration on a specific journey for them, because each student's going to bring their separate passions. So how do we support them exploring them, and then how do we support them ultimately, by the end of that sophomore year, affirming their decisions? So what programs are we doing that tells them they are on track, they are doing a good job, and they are developing at a great rate? So that's essentially the Molly Schaller work. Sophomore slump is real. It's a phenomenon that's been documented through a lot of the literature, and really what it just tells us is that sophomore students, they redefine their social groups, they redefine their expectations their sophomore year, and they have periods of slumping. They don't have a year-long slump. So when people are talking to me on campus about our sophomores, they ask me, so how are we fighting the sophomore slump? And for each student, really, they're going to slump at different times. They're going to slump as they're looking for a job financially. They're going to slump as they're selecting their major. So how do we let them know we have an institution-wide support structure to support that development. Transitional theory, I really like Nancy Schlossberg's work, and really going from marginal to mattering. So how do we show sophomore students they matter that second year when all that emphasis is put on first-year programs? And then student development theory, I'm not really going to touch on that. I'm sure there's a lot of experts here in the chat room. So again, going further into the sophomore year, they are at that point where they are balancing what they have learned with what they could learn with the ongoing debt that they are accumulating. So we need to make sure that we have some process to motivate and encourage those students because a lot of times their benchmarks are really just gen ed requirements that they are checking off on a list. And it can get routine at times for those sophomore students. And then when they move back into our housing departments, what do we do to celebrate them that's different than their first year? Because that first year they have a welcome weekend, they have welcome week, preview week, they have move-in programs, they are part of a University 101 curriculum in our case. But at what point in their second year do we celebrate them like that? And I'd argue before our sophomore year experience, none at all. So we are shining a light now on that need. And then what affiliation needs do they have? You know, we still hear from our sophomore students what clubs and orgs are available to me. I missed out my first year, so I guess I'm not going to join. And just letting students know that there's opportunities throughout their college career to get the resources and support that they need. And if you want to look at it in terms of a diverse cross-section here, this is again Molly Schaller's work. I like this graphic because it really shows you the sophomore year experience is going to broaden. It's not going to focus for each student in terms of their interests, their preferences, and who the population as a group is. So there's going to be more difference between that group as they go through their career because they're going to start diving into all the different majors, all the different clubs that you offer throughout the year. And they're going to become a different individual, and we want them to reflect critically on their first year choices in that second year, and we want them to really make decisions on who they want to be for the rest of their college career. And then institutional process. So this is the point where we want to turn the lens back on your current campus, and if you have pencil and paper, write down where are you as an institution creating stress for sophomore students. So I think it's an important question to ask, and it's one that we ask, or I ask when I go into meetings across campus, is for sophomore students, do they have more or less resources than a first-year student? For sophomore students, do they have more or less demands on them than a sophomore student? For residence life, I told them our housing department, I think we create stress for sophomore students just by having a first-year residency requirement. So there's no choice for a first-year student. They have to live on campus. But for a second-year student, now they have choice. So when will they see that stress? They're going to see it at the end of their first year. They're not going to see it when they come back that second year in the same way. But they are going to face stress at the end of that first year on who's my roommate, where am I going to live, and it's going to help define their college career. So how do we get information out in front of them? And then for their sophomore year, when they come back, they're going to realize that they're going to be reflecting on that decision they made their first year and where they chose to live. Orientation and centralized resources. So what department's communicating with your first year students prior to admittance and after they come, and then what campus office is communicating to them on an ongoing basis. And if you do not have one, how do you create one? Financially, do you front load financial aid, scholarships, housing waivers, and that second year, is there more or less resources for your sophomore students? One of the things unique Central is we were able to offer a $1,000 housing waiver for sophomore students if they chose to return to residence halls. So it wasn't available for on-campus apartments, it wasn't available if they lived off campus, it was just through our housing department we were able to offer that housing waiver. and we are going to see the returns on that in September. So right now I don't have any good numbers to report. And then academically, what do we ask for them in terms of meeting with advisors and major declaration and prerequisite or introductory classes? At Central, we are requiring them to declare their major by 75 credits. And there are 45 credit holds on their account. So one of the ways that we're supporting sophomore students is making them check in with an advisor during their sophomore year, which was unique. And so what we've done is we're going to term that hold the sophomore hold, just to further emphasize that the reason they have that hold is because they are sophomores. So at Central, why is there a focus on the sophomore year experience? And so this is the point where I test our technology a little bit. And I'm going to load a video here. What we did was we went around to our sophomore students during an event that we were hosting, and we said if in exchange for a sophomore selfie stick or a t-shirt, their choice, they could provide us with information on what their sophomore year was like. And really it gave us a good focus group, something to point at and something to give to faculty and staff as they talked with us about what are sophomore year students facing, and we were able to pull up a video and say, well, let's hear it from their voice. So here we go. These are Central students from last year. And please let me know if the audio is not working.
My sophomore year was how many events did it put on for sophomores. One thing I would have liked to have known for my sophomore year is when and where campus events will be taking place. I wish I would have known about more free shared opportunities. I wish I had known about community club. As a summer, I just want to stay more connected. I wish I could do that more, and I hope I still do that. Stay connected with everything I've been a part of. I'd like to learn about my sophomore year is how to fill out my 4-year plan. One thing I wish I knew about my sophomore year is how to find my advisor online. One thing I wish I would have known is how to choose a major. Alright, one thing I wish I knew about my sophomore year is that it's easy to double major. Okay, so the one thing I wish I knew about my sophomore year was not stress about choosing your major, and that it's not as hard as you think. Just go talk to them. I wish I knew about sophomore year is how awesome it is to be on campus with your friends. Such a good experience, and look forward to doing it again next year. One thing I really would have loved to know is that PE classes, they're 1 credit, and they're really fun to get to meet people and do some activities. Awesome. One thing I wish I knew my sophomore year was I wish I put more time in studying. One thing I wish I knew during my sophomore year is the difficulty level of classes. So one thing I wish I knew about my sophomore year is that it's okay to talk to your teacher about anything, having different classes, and get more information about stuff. One thing I wish I knew about my sophomore year is you can run out of dentist mistakes. Show up for classes actually on time and not super late. One thing I wish I knew about my sophomore year is how to manage my time. One thing I wish I would have knew about my sophomore year experience, or sophomore year, is where to find better jobs.
All right, so let me dive back into the PowerPoint here. And again, hopefully it's working for all of you. So hopefully that brief video showed you a little bit about the sophomore student profile here at CWU. There were advising changes and academic hold requirements that were new this year, so they weren't imposed on other sophomores. So it was nice to hear from sophomore students some of those tips on signing up for classes on time, how to choose their major, and Yeah, so I think I've covered the sophomore student at Central pretty well. So what did we do at Central to support sophomore year experience? So these are some posters from last year, and let me dive into it. One of the things that we wanted to do was start with a mission. What are we going to accomplish through a sophomore year experience? And we identified really 5 areas that sophomore students needed support. And one, it was faculty-student engagement. We wanted to help support that mentorship process, that sophomore students would be really engaged with their faculty members, especially as they're selecting an academic major. And then empower the sophomore students to navigate the systems that we have more effectively. We were seeing, you heard from their video that they weren't necessarily keeping up with their to-dos. So one of the things that we did was help work on a marketing campaign with IT as they reformatted their central login. So when the students log in, they now have an overhauled look, and hopefully it gives them better access to our resources here at the university. And again, we partnered with their publicity because we believe it's important for our sophomore students. Build community and peer support through campus involvement and experiential learning. So what are those opportunities for sophomore students to start giving back to their communities with the experiences that they learned? How are we connecting their strengths with academic success? Many of you in the housing profession are very aware of Strengths Quest and the power it has to help students relate to one another and to really relate with the profession. And Strengths program we worked with here, and I helped partner with Career Services, was Dependable Strengths. And it was really a very similar version to Strengths Quest, but to draw out rather than taking a survey. The sophomore students would fill out experience essays on times that they felt they accomplished something, and through these experiences we draw out their strengths rather than through the survey. But the end result really is having that 5-point list of strengths that they can discuss in either an academic setting, a career setting, or as a personality setting. So, and then it transitions students into majors and identified career paths, because what we see is that first year they have support of the orientation programs, University 101. Their second year they had some support from the colleges, but they were really trying to get declared. And then by the third and fourth year, they do have the support of their colleges that they are admitted to. So what we want to see is those students that do not have a college, that are undecided, that are outside of University 101, that we support their transition into those colleges, because ultimately we want them to connect to a major and get declared. So I apologize, this came out a little blurry. Using that mission, we came up with 4 pillars for the program. What would it look like? So 1 is academic success, so all things academics. 2, campus connections, again, navigating campus resources. 3, service and experiential learning. What are they doing to become a global citizen? What are they doing to engage their community? And then 4 career exploration, which is unique to the sophomore year. So some of these might look similar to pillars or to values that you have for a first-year program, but that career exploration is really pivotal for that second-year student. All right, so moving into that implementation timeline, like I had said, this isn't more than a year and a half old here. The sophomore year task force, chaired by the Career Services Department, got together in January, and by June they had convened, wrote a report, a nice 20-page document outlining their recommendations, and by August I was put into this position on an interim basis to really get this program started off from the ground up. I hired a graduate assistant. One of the initiatives that we had was Mapworks, and I will get into her job duties a little bit later. So I took the time in September to write out a mission and outcomes. I created that logo that you've seen on a few of these slides, and created welcome back programs so students could see themselves into their second year with new programs and offerings. And then with Haight, I apologize, I don't have examples for the Haight program, but I will describe that as we go later. And then you see we've taken a year off. The SYE Advisory Board reconvened with new seats on the panel. It has a much heavier academic focus, so we have representatives from each of the 4 colleges, as well as representatives from the library and academic research. because we want to make sure that over this next year our policy initiatives are more academically focused. You'll see there was a real heavy lean towards the social or student services social program side. Really, we wanted students to engage with our programs on a friendly basis. That selfie stick photo, that's me down there on the bottom right. So if you had any questions about who's this person rambling on in front of you, that's me. And that was a picture taken with a selfie stick at the SYE halfway to graduation celebration. Our marketing plan. So you see our similar logos up there at the top. We did have a very robust FYE program, and what we wanted to do was model our program similarly so students weren't, shocked or put off by a different program, but really we work in tandem as different branches of our new student programs to support the student entry and continued support into the university. So in terms of marketing plan, you can see we really just tried to brand Central as having multiple avenues for student success. So we wanted sophomore year to be prevalent in what we did. So it's very much online. It's on T-shirts. It's on water bottles. It is part of our new student orientation. So as a first-year student, they are going to be introduced to sophomore year concepts, so they know that there's a path for them. What we don't want is that first-year student struggling out and not getting to take advantage of sophomore year resources. So we did electronic newsletter. That was probably the most effective thing that we did in terms of communication. We got approval to email each sophomore student, and we were doing that on a monthly basis. For the upcoming year, we're going to do that on a bi-weekly basis, so twice a month. And we're also, what I'm looking at doing is reformatting it into more of a blog-style newsletter, but with a video entry or a video intro that is delivered to their inbox. So that way they can hopefully interact with the video a little bit, and it'll lead them into our blog-style post. And the blog-style post really has resources from all across campus. I'm not leading any one initiative, but really gathering campus resources that currently exist for sophomore students and making those sophomore students aware of them and making our RAs aware of them, so that way we can incentivize the RA walkovers so they can bring sophomore students to already programmed sophomore year events. You saw the Sophomore Success Guide. You heard in the video the 4-year plan. This is what they hand out during their University 101 section, and down there in the bottom you can see an SYE logo. So a lot of those benchmarks in this sophomore year are the Sophomore Year Experience pit stops, things that we want them to accomplish. We want them to go to study abroad fair, majors fair. We want them to meet with their academic major. We want them to consider living on. Those are all things that are advertised there in the success guide that they're going to get as a first-year student. So again, making it a full new student welcome with sophomore year focus as well. Welcome Back Week, you can see our cover to our Welcome Week 2015. We'll have a link there to the website soon on that poster. So the poster will go out and around campus, and then that'll also be an 8-page booklet that all residents will receive. I'm partnering this year with our again, first year experience to make this a transfer book. So the transfer students and sophomore students will receive this welcome week to engage our transfer students. One of the areas that the task force recommended was how we improve communication to transfer students. And then Mapworks. So those of you that aren't using Mapworks or not Mapworks School, it's a 150 question questionnaire that asks students their third week of the university if they're facing any transitional issues. And then we work as a campus to follow up on those issues. So the graduate assistant was identified as her main role was to follow up with sophomore students and above that identified as at risk through the Mapworks assessment. For the upcoming year, we're going to look at peer-to-peer, see if we can do more upper-class student mentoring, and then we're also looking to, again, hire another graduate assistant to work on the Mapworks follow-up. And the Academic Success Campaign, that was also part of the follow-up, is a follow-up campus-wide with some of the benchmarks or some of the social norms behind the academics to make our students realize or visualize a bit more success in the academic realm. So we had 3 different prongs to that approach. One was, as you can see, talk to your instructors. The other was keep calm and study on, and then keep calm and go to class. Really the 3 things that we see as being the best predictors of their academic success: studying, talking to their instructors, and attending class. And then sophomore year initiatives as well, the Haight Program. So like I said, this is a campus-wide effort. So Residence Life was doing programs in the halls that would support those SYE pillars, as well as Career Services was doing sophomore year focused events. Academic Advising had the Academic Advising Sophomore Year Experience holds. So what we did is combined all those. We worked with our campus publicity department that puts out a Haight program each quarter that lists all the quarterly events. And so it's everything from diversity, leadership, and social, community engagement to our theater arts. And we would identify and brand them as SYE. We would partner with them and really push our sophomore year students into those programs that we know are going to meet those pillars. For this upcoming year, so for the previous year, we were incentivizing their attendance, and if they were a sophomore student, you could see the Best Year Ever t-shirt. They were receiving that t-shirt when they were attending the Sophomore Year Experience events. And for this upcoming year, we're going to do a better job of assessing what they have learned as a result of those, so that way we can tie that marketing piece to their learning outcomes rather than just their attendance. Sophomore socials, that was part of that faculty to student engagement. We were putting on more socials where we were creating an intimate setting for faculty to discuss things as, like internships or test taking or study abroad options with sophomore students. We also had, again, residence hall programming, RAs. Our coordinators, our managers were all doing programs that were already sophomore year focused. They were bringing in personality inventories from Career Services. They were going out and doing community service work. And really what we want to do is help the RAs track that they are meeting SYE objectives for this upcoming year. So before they even put on a program, they're going to be asked if it's an FYE or SYE program and what learning or what pillar might it meet. So that way we can go back and look through them and really have a better assessment of what we've done in the residence halls. We did a faculty luncheon where we, again, helped facilitate student-faculty interaction, but really it was also to build advocates across campus and our faculty on what they are teaching our sophomore year students, who's serving our sophomore year students. So really just all things sophomores at that faculty luncheon. And then our halfway to graduation celebration, you can see that poster down there at the bottom. Again, creating a benchmark or a checkpoint for students to check in and say, you're doing a good job, you're a sophomore student, you're only halfway there, but keep focused on that end goal. And what worked? So we do know the website and the e-newsletter. You can go back, you can track visits, you can track clicks. You can see what they were looking at in that e-newsletter. And again, I would encourage you, if you're not currently using one, find an electronic form of communication and use that as an assessment piece for your sophomore year students, because it'll also give you a good indicator of what needs that they have. So if you set it up where you only have 4 click-throughs and you put them around each of the pillars, you can weight your pillars by the end of the year with if students were clicking into career, or students were clicking into the community service, and really identify what your sophomore students need year to year. Mapworks, again, it works well if you have people following up with what the students report. What we found is with 3,000 students responding to the survey, it took all hands on deck to make sure that we were following up in a timely manner, especially with those open-ended questions where you say any issues with the university and the student wants to type in a paragraph. I feel the need that we all need to respond to that student's paragraph, and just understanding workloads and case management for the campus was difficult, but going into the second year we have a much better game plan. Faculty luncheon, I would probably do that a little differently and identify students rather than identify faculty that want to have faculty mentorship and then bring in faculty alongside. I think that would be a better phrasing of it because our students aren't necessarily ready to engage on their lunch hour. Sophomore socials, we did a test anxiety program. One of the things for Mapworks, you can identify trends for your university. So 40% of all of our students reported severe or moderate test anxiety. They were getting anxious before exams. They felt sweaty, nervous, and they felt they were going to perform poorly. So I thought, well, what better thing to do than to partner with our library and to invite students to come back at 7 at night to talk about their anxiety. Students don't want to come back to the library at 7 o'clock at night and talk about their anxiety. We had 2 students arrive. We were sending this out to 600 students that all reported this anxiety. So we had a pretty poor turnout. But what happened as a result of that, I like to talk about, because the library took it on their own to create an online module to teach students about test anxiety, and they put all the resources available on the web. So the next day I asked them for a link to that resource, and I sent that out in our very next newsletter. And I sent it out specifically to 400 students that reported extreme test anxiety, and of those 400, immediately 100 students clicked on it between Thursday and Friday. So 100 of the students were following up at home on test anxiety, but they aren't going to come to a program to talk about their test anxiety. So it really gives you a good understanding of how we follow up and what methods we use, and really need to think about how do we phrase or publicize what we do. Same with undergraduate research. We had 600 students present undergraduate research in May. So in October, we put out a social on undergraduate research, how to get involved. And what I found was, again, 6 students showed up for an undergraduate research social. But in May, we had quite a few more than 6 students presenting undergraduate research. So they're going to present undergraduate research. Maybe they don't want to hear about it in October. So what we're going to do next year is partner with the Source, which is our symposium for undergraduate research, and really highlight our sophomore students that do present as our overachieving students, do some news stories on them, provide a sophomore social at the end of it, and again, drum up that sophomore experience as a celebratory experience for our high-achieving sophomores. And then create sophomore traditions. The welcome week and the halfway to graduation celebration were our 2 most attended events, and I see the same for this upcoming year. We've rephrased some of it, like sophomore welcome is now the sophomore fall fest. And instead of a appetizer style spread, we're going to do the selfie sticks again for our sophomore students, and have a sophomore year selfie stick runway, and invite out the colleges to discuss different major options, invite out career services to talk about their upcoming workshops and the study abroad fair. So they would be getting the same information as they did during their reception, but instead of calling it a reception, again, calling it a fall fest, something a little more sexy for our sophomore students. And going into what's next, this is our t-shirt design that I'm looking at for next year. Somebody brought up the point that the lightning bolt looks a little Harry Potter-ish, so I might change up the lightning bolt quite a bit. What's next is peer-to-peer support. I am in the process of hiring some undergraduate students to do some of the Mapworks follow-up that the graduate assistant was, because some of our upper class students from our Student Academic Senate had approached me about a mentoring program for biology students, for comm students, for chemistry students, and I thought, maybe there's a role for our upper class juniors and seniors to give back with some of the knowledge. And they've been through our institution for their first and second year, so they have a good understanding on the transitional issues sophomores are facing. And I'm calling that position a sophomore success story, because those are the students that have been there and done that. So they're not a peer mentor, they're not an educator, they are a sophomore success story. So hopefully they can share that story back to the other sophomores. Residence life tracking, I mentioned that a little bit. We are working to identify SYE events before they happen, identify which pillar they are addressing, and working on assessment afterwards. And then we also have card swipes for each of our residence hall events now. So each of the buildings and each of the events will have a card swipe, so we can track attendance and see if it's the same students attending workshop to workshop, or if we're doing enough to create a broad cross-section that it appeals to more sophomores. We're going to reformat our past programs, changing the welcome reception to the Sophomore Fall Fest. We're probably going to stick with halfway to graduation as a good moniker for that event. And then the sophomore socials will change up a little bit and work with individual faculty in their classrooms to work with to move those classrooms outside and do a field experiment with experience with them. So academically, what we've done is I've requested a list of all of our sophomore year students, what classes they attended, so we have a better sense of where our sophomores go to class. What we do not have at our university is a sophomore cohort of classes. There is not one spot that I can go look to go talk to sophomore students. So I'm going to do I'm going to reverse that, and I'm going to go talk to our faculty who teach our sophomore students, because I can identify them a lot easier. And through those faculty, hopefully work our learning outcomes into their classrooms. Get English 101, 110, those creative writing courses. If our sophomore experience is asking our students to assess and refine their educational goals, that should be done in a creative writing class where they're asked to write a page about themselves. They could relate that back to their educational goals. So that's one of the things that we're doing is I'm going to look at that class list, see if in Accounting 252, which is our introductory accounting class series, how can they relate that accounting class to their personal finances through their coursework, so that way they're getting great experience in the classroom. And then how can they bring that back to the residence halls as well? So in what areas are we asking our sophomore students to bring their education and put on programs and experiences in the residence halls? That's a challenge I have for our current RAs for the upcoming year, is partnering with our sophomore students, because at that age we want them to be really engaging at that level rather than just program attendance. If you're just asking program attendance from sophomores, you're not hitting your high achievers, which is really who you want to push to motivate. And then celebrate. They do not get enough recognition that sophomore year, and that's our goal, is make sure that there's a news story, press release, some sort of recognition for our sophomore students going out, at least in that bi-weekly newsletter, so that they know what they need to attain. So nationally, what's best practice for sophomore year students? There's a lot of institutional action happening. You look at transitional assistance. You need to look at, do you have assistance into a new residence? And do you have assistance into major? Because that's really the two transitions that we have here. That's why my slides are very central focused. Sustained contact and community building, not front-loaded contact and community building. We see so much in the fall quarter. It needs to be sustained. And we also need to identify who's our new and transfer students for fall or for winter and spring, and make sure that we celebrate their entry into our communities as well. Academic involvement and support, and then monitoring and early warning for our at-risk students. So over the last few years, you can really see this outgrowth of SYU programs. This is a 2014 study on how long the programs had been around, and the overwhelming majority, 77%, was in the last 5 years. And the other 25% of the programs, I would definitely argue, are mostly private school or cohort-based schools that already had that cohort of classes going through, and were supporting class traditions that way, but not necessarily intervention or support as Central is doing. 10 most frequent campus-wide objectives. Obviously at top, retention has been a big issue, both retention in the residence halls and retention at the university. So that is definitely a push for our program as well, is getting those students to stay at the university, and but they aren't going to stay just because we told them to. So we need to look at how do we make it a passion of theirs to complete their degree? How do we create pathways for them to do so? And how do we ease the barriers that they're facing? Sophomore year initiatives, overwhelming. Academic advising is the #1 program that's deemed effective by campuses when they self-report which programs are the most effective. Live-on requirement may be effective. I would argue, what's the marketing approach that you're going to do, because that live-on requirement could be a pill to swallow for some. And then early alert is the other notable effective program. And for us, you saw that $1,000 housing waiver. I also did door hangers, as you can see. I kept that keep calm going on in spring quarter, so they hadn't seen it for a quarter and a half, and we put it back on their doorknobs in May to make sure that they got registered before leaving the university. We didn't want to see summer melt from our first-year students, and on the back side of that keep calm and talk to your advisor was the $1,000 housing waiver information, so make sure that sophomore or first-year students knew prior to leaving the university that they still had that as an option to choose to live on campus. And yeah, going into assessing success, what I want to leave you with is this list of what are you doing to track and assess what sophomore students are accomplishing. Because if they're living with you, I would argue they're already accomplishing quite a bit, but do you know what experiences they want to pursue, what experiences they are pursuing, what classes they're taking, where they're living? Because to start the sophomore year experience, I had to know where our sophomore students were, and that was why I really went to the electronic communication. Because of our 1,500 sophomore year cohort, only 200 were living on campus in the residence halls with me. Another 400 were living in the on-campus apartments. But apartment living, as you all know, is quite different than the residence hall living, and it's totally up to them whether they're going to engage with us or not. Health, wellness, and counseling, are they accessing the services they need to be a healthy, productive student? And how do you know that they're accessing those services? And then focus groups. It's powerful to just sit down with 10 students and hear what they have to say. I would make sure that you have a script to that focus group. And for us, with Mapworks, we're able to identify areas of need, and we can bring in students with similar needs to make sure that if they're facing similar programs or similar issues, how are we addressing it on a university basis, university-wide? And then at the bottom there, those are all 3 sophomore year assessments. That top one is a assessment designed by a dissertation through Ohio State University, excuse me, and really it just measured the effectiveness of a program, but it was for sophomore specific students assessment. That second is a Noah Levitz, which is a consulting group, so you would have to pay for that second year student assessment, and that last one is free through thrivingинcollege.org. And the spirituality and thriving quotient was something that came up at the student success seminar that I went to out in South Carolina for the students in transition. Really looking at your sophomore spirituality, and do they have meaning, do they have purpose for their career, and that was the most predictive factor for their retention at their sophomore level, and that was something that was discussed ad nauseum there at the success, is how do you create that meaning for their college career. And that's all I have to leave you with. And I see on the side Katie's posted the questions for Eric. So if there are any questions.
Yeah, Eric, what an incredible presentation. So please, let's start getting some questions going. Eric, thank you so much. What an incredibly depth of program that you have there at Central.
Thanks.
Yep. I will start off. Really, everything that you're doing has so many different moving parts across the university. So, what kind of things did you do to build relationships and to help kind of build this message into all sorts of things, from the advising to the residential life and things? How did you kind of coalition build?
Well, one of the things was know who to put in the position. I'd been at Central for the last 10 years, but I'd been in recreation and campus life. And one of the things that Richard DeShields really wanted to do when he pushed this program was to make sure that it had a campus-wide approach. And so when he asked me to take the position on an interim basis, it was really because of my experience with the campus life programs and knowing that I would be able to work well with them. And then for academic advising, you really just have to show them the value of what you're doing. So providing them the e-newsletter and giving them space in that was invaluable to me, because I was able to give them free advertising for the important to-dos that they have, and we know it's important for our sophomore students to get that communication. So it's a win-win for both of us, and just making sure that you approach enough people. And I just kept the conversation going. I was attending retention task force and some other, Discover orientation task force, and just making sure that at each meeting I would stand up and say, please catch me after the meeting if you want to talk about sophomore year experience. And again, it was position funded through the provost. So if you lead with that, it usually gets you a lot of friends.
Yeah. That's great. I think this is a great example of putting a great professional in the right position. So that's a great vision from the leadership that started this and got you into this. We have a question from Sarah. What are the differences you see between sophomores that started on campus as first years compared to sophomores that started as transfer students?
Sophomores that started as transfer students typically aren't as engaged with our clubs and orgs. And that's really a push of mine, is to get them on that student life side, get them focused on that. The students that transfer in are also all over the place in their academic career. So that first year is important for setting up their academic career. And we see a lot less issue with them getting into majors. And so we're going to see our sophomore transfer students struggle and potentially struggle out based on what prereqs that they've taken at their community college level or at the other colleges. So making sure that when we were having events, we would have an academic advisor present, so that way they had somebody to talk to at the welcome or at the halfway to graduation celebration, because then they were talking to somebody that had knowledge of what they needed to accomplish.
Great. There's another question from Ben about the transfer student population. He's asking, what is the transfer student population like at CWU, and how are they included in SYE? So you talked a little bit about that. How many students are we talking about? Kind of where is their story coming from? Are they so I'm adding to Ben's question. Sorry, Ben. Are they coming from local, or what's their story?
Well, the transfer students that we see about 70% of our students from a total population standpoint from the west side of Washington. So they're not east side students. They are transferring. They're moving away from their support setup systems. So we become home. And for the sophomore year transfer, it was recommended in our task force report that we really focus on that. And I'm actually meeting with the registrar today at 3 because I want those numbers for the upcoming year. Last year we had about 400 students that fell into that sophomore year transfer, because the bulk of our transfers are coming in at the junior year and above. So transfer support at Central is really shifted to, before they get here, are they taking the right classes, and do they have the resources in front of them for housing? So the first thing I did was meet with our transfer assistance advisor to make sure that they were aware of what we did in the residence halls. So that way we have a referral system set up between her and I. If they have any questions about student life or housing, she's referring them immediately to me so I can get them the correct information. And then that $1,000 housing waiver to apply to sophomores, it was originally envisioned that we would just do it to first-year students to recognize that first year living on. We're going to give you the $1,000 housing waiver. So that way it was a 2-year, essentially $1,000 housing waiver. Their first year they would have to pay in to get the perk their second year. But we opened that up to sophomore transfers as well, because we recognize the importance of living on campus to their social life. So that was new for this year, is we're extending that to transfer students.
Great. Great. And another question here about RAs. They're wondering what training you provide to RAs surrounding the sophomore year experience.
Well, when you look at your RAs, if you have a 3-month or a 3-quarter requirement for them to live on before they become an RA, you end up finding that half of your RA population could be a sophomore. So the sophomore year experience, when you sit down with all of the RAs, the first thing I do is, who's a sophomore? And you get them to raise their hands. They look around, they see each other. And it helps to refocus that conversation because, I present them with the pillars. I present them with program expectations in terms of sophomore year, and I present them with what the campus is doing, because we want them to do walkover events where they gather the residents, but they bring them to a sophomore year experience event on campus because it's attended by professionals, and it helps the career services. It'll help study abroad. It'll help the library see the value in residents' life if you can get them to walk over as a group and have the RA introduce themselves to that presenter or to that workshop and let them know why they came over. It's powerful for those professional staff to build a coalition, as you had said. But again, when they raise their hand at the beginning, I have them look around at each other, make sure that they know that they're all sophomores, and then get them to refocus that conversation, knowing that sophomore year students are now leaders on our university. What are we doing to facilitate that student leadership at the sophomore level? Because they do not need to just attend programs. They should be expected in the residence halls to contribute to their community through hosting their own programs. And moving to more of an intentional conversation model where we understand our students as they move in and connect them and their strengths to what we're currently doing. So it takes a lot more work on the front end to figure out who your sophomore students are, but in terms of our population, we have significantly less sophomores than we do first-year students, and we want those sophomores to be seen as leaders in the residence halls and invite them over to our first-year halls so they can contribute in those areas, and that's an approach for our staff training for this fall.
Wow, great. Great.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Eric? Those are excellent questions. Really good conversation going. Wow. So Eric is, I guess, probably available at CW. It seems like you're just doing incredible things that folks probably will perhaps reach out to kind of see what's going on. So thank you so much, Eric. Oh, and Eric provided his email for everyone, so thank you. So thank you so much, Eric, for this presentation. It was just absolutely incredible and added to a conversation around a group of students who we don't always think about but are incredibly important in retaining our folks till graduation. So thank you. Great. So thank you also everyone else for attending August First Friday webinar on the Sophomore Year Experience. This is again Kate Flowers. I am the Professional Development Committee Chair. If you are interested in getting more involved with Northwest Akuho, we encourage you to join committees. They're a great way to meet folks, get involved in the region, and just also be connected and do some great work for your organization. So please join us for our September First Friday webinar. We're working on a topic right now, so you can check out on Facebook or on the website for that topic, but always First Friday. So thank you. Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.